when you're working with couples, you're kind of managing this really strong, energetic experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're trying to say the same thing. They just are not, and they're agreeing, but in their mind, maybe they're fixating on a detail and their partner's not seeing this specific detail the way that, so, and then there might be a lot of criticism, and it's like, whoa, guys, let's just take a break here.
Phil for you.
Like, I think you're both trying to say the same things. You're just expressing it in different ways.
Man, I just got this overwhelming sense of what it must be like to be a therapist sitting in your chair and two intimate human beings walk in the middle of a context that you're oblivious to, and then it unfolds in front of you like I just had this thought of a small town at the bottom of a big hill, and there's like a dam at the top of that hill, and the dam breaking, and all of that water coming down. And you're, as a therapist, this town that's like, oh my goodness, now I need to pick through the pieces of what happened there and what's going on. That seems impossible. How do you do that?
Well, what I'll say is that oftentimes the thing that people think that they're coming into therapy for is not what we end up addressing.
Yeah.
And it might be part of it, but oftentimes we're like, okay, we think sometimes it can be something's hyper specific. Like maybe there's a really big life decision that needs to be made, and they're not having an agreement on this.
Jamie,
thing.
I just want you to tell me that she's wrong and I'm right.
And it's interesting because once you start looking at it, you're like, oh, okay, there's so much more here that we need to work with, that we have to like identify and work with. And that can be super challenging. And one thing I think that is very humbling about being a therapist, and I always try to keep this in perspective, and I love Esther Perel's approach. She has a podcast that I listen to.
Okay.
That is, she'll do individual sessions and she'll record it with one session with a couple, and they get one shot with her. And the way she's able to kind of manage the energy is just super interesting. But, you know, her approach and the way she's able to be directive in a way that's also compassionate, I really pull a lot of from her framework a little bit. Sort of just trying to understand, like, okay, what's really going on here? What need is not being met? That's a great question. It's like, what need do you have in this relationship that is not being met? And that can look so different for each people. Or let's look at your values. Let's look at what is your personal value system, and then what are your values as a couple?
Yeah.
And how are they misaligned?
Yeah, that reminds me that John Gottman, he talked about the 5 factors of trustworthiness, how we identify trustworthiness between two people, and one of them was alignment of values, ethics.
I think it's huge. Yeah, absolutely.
They don't have to be the same. You could both be robbers, but you both have to be robbers. So you have to have compatible values.
Well, I think it's helpful to have compatibility across your value system for sure. And what I will also say is, if those values are, maybe you have a difference in terms of like how you approach different values, are you still able to respect an individual even if they have differing values?
That's where that contempt comes up.
Right. So you think about this in terms of like, you know, identifying an individual in relation to their political beliefs. Okay. Are you able to hold compassion for them and see them as an individual separate from this specific belief system? But oftentimes, and I think this is a great way to look at this, is that we all tend to kind of think about things. And Jonathan Haidt, he's written a few books, but he has a book out now called The Anxious Generation. But one of his, in The Coddling of the American Mind, he focuses on this idea that we think in cognitive distortions. And so we're oftentimes like personalizing things that might not even belong to us, or we're over identifying with, you know, specific values, and we're not able to separate and see this person as an individual separate from whatever their belief system is.
That,
Can you?
That's an inability to find the bridge
Yeah.
to relate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to look at it in that way is how much are we personalizing this experience, or are we able to see this person's viewpoint as their view and not tied to who they are so strongly to where we're not able to
It's making us
respect the
fragile.
individual. Yeah.
It's making us fragile socially. I want to have conversations with people that are different from me.
Well, I think we have to.
We
right?
have to.
We have to.
But if I have a disagreement, or if I have a different political lens or a different political, foundation, then the person's like, oh, canceled.
Well, see, that's the thing.
You're canceled. I'm going to get you off my Facebook thing. We can't even have
a conversation.
Well, then how do we move towards the middle? How do we?
So in clinical practice, we talk about this being like black and white thinking.
Yep.
All or nothing.
Yeah,
thinking.
all or nothing thinking.
And you can see this. This is one of the character we talk about, borderline personality traits. That's one of the hallmarks of borderline personality disorder, is this tendency to have extreme ideation, like really strong feelings for someone, and then going to this other opposite end of that spectrum where we're devaluing someone, or it becomes hypercritical.
Isn't that our political landscape right now?
And I think there's so much.
Do we
there.
talk about these things in any other way other than like, if this person wins, it's going to be Armageddon, and if this person doesn't win, if this person wins, we're going to get all the things you want in the world. So
this is the way that I've been able to navigate that, because it's coming up so much in one of the ways that I've been able to sort of navigate this, because I want people to feel like some therapists might have a boundary around discussing that at all. I don't have that boundary, because for me, it's, again, I try to go back to how are we thinking about this if we relate it back to cognitive behavioral therapy, and we're thinking about reframing our thoughts, reframing a distortion where we might be catastrophizing in a specific way out of fear. It's really, I found it to be much easier to navigate when we're like, okay, well, what is causing you to go to this worst case scenario? And so it's sort of like, okay, well, let's step back, and what are some of the daily practices that might have you going down these rabbit holes where it feels like this is so intense? Sometimes you're telling them like, okay, maybe we should just take a step off of social media a little bit. So we're not just inundated with all of this algorithm just continually feeding us.
I think you should just tell everybody that at the onset of therapy, or just have the shirt. Why don't you just take a step back from social media for a sec?
Well, and it's interesting, but where I look at that in terms of like how we're navigating politics through a therapeutic lens, it's sort of like, okay, I think people have their own individual value systems.
Yeah, we do.
And we have our individual value systems, and there is a sort of a general understanding that like we're not going to get everything we want with any candidate, right? And so there might be things, I think more people, if they were able to have these nuanced conversations, would realize that, wait, we have way more in common than we thought.
We really
we're not
do.
able to get there. So if we can bridge this connection.
We start with the fringes.
Right.
Why don't we start with the beginning and get a whole, it's like the John Gottman 5-1. We need to build that relational bridge with all the things we agree on.
Yes.
Which I imagine is a lot.
Yeah. And so if you can get them to say, okay, so this value is super important, and I can completely understand why that's so important to you, because that is impacting your family in a very significant way, or it's challenging your personal autonomy. So it makes so much sense to me that you're so closely tied that you would want to vote one way, even based on a specific issue, right? And so from this framework of we have these individual values that are really important to us, and there's this other person that also has their own values, and they might look different for each individual. And there's a sense of knowing that like we're not going to get everything we want, but can we do the way I would say I say, like, I think people tend to vote knowing that they're not gonna get everything they want, but they're gonna vote in alliance with the values that are most important to them.